All right, let's talk about a group you see in the headlines all the time, especially when it comes to Pakistan's borderlands, the Frontier Corps. For some, they're the guardians of a dangerous frontier. For others, well, they're seen as oppressors. It's a really powerful paramilitary group with this long, tangled history. So in this explainer, we're going to dig in and figure out exactly who they are and why they stir up so much controversy.
Okay, so first things first, let's get one thing straight, because a lot of people mix this up. You hear Frontier Corps, or FC, and you might think of the Frontier Constabulary. Nope, they are totally different. The FC, the one we're talking about, is a paramilitary force. Think military structure, army officers in charge. The Constabulary, on the other hand, is basically a police force. And that difference right there, it's absolutely crucial for understanding everything else about their role.
So, to really get a grip on the Frontier Corps today, we've got to jump in a time machine and go way back. We're talking about the height of the British Empire. The whole identity, the very DNA of this force, was forged on the rugged frontiers of British India. And trust me, that colonial legacy, it still echoes in everything they do.
You can really see how this force has morphed over time. It all kicks off in 1907, right? A classic colonial creation by the British to basically manage the tribal areas. Then, fast forward to 1947, Pakistan gains independence and the Corps gets bigger. But here's the real turning point, the mid-1970s. This is when their whole mission changes. They go from being border patrol guys to being deployed as a full-on counterinsurgency force. And that one shift, it pretty much defines the complicated, messy role they play to this day.
And all that history leads us right here, to this idea of a force with two completely different faces. See, today the FMRC is operating under what's called a dual mandate, and that basically forces them to act in two, often contradictory, ways at the exact same time.
I mean, just look at their job description on paper. It is massive. Their duties totally blur the lines between a regular army and a local police force. One minute they're assisting in national defense, the next they're helping with local law and order. And this incredibly broad mandate, well, that's where you find both their greatest strength and the source of so much of the controversy.
So when you see it in practice, this dual mandate is, well, it's a pretty stark contrast. On one hand, you've got this hard-nosed security force. They're doing counterinsurgency, riot control, and they have the power to arrest and detain people. But then on the other hand, they're also a soft power tool. They're out there building schools and hospitals. It's a classic hearts and minds campaign, right? Trying to win over the local population.
So you might be asking, how on earth do you manage a force with such a massive split personality mission? Well, they've had to adapt. And a huge reorganization back in 2017 totally changed how they operate, really as a direct response to just how big their job had become.
And that decision to split the command in the massive Balochistan region, man, that tells you everything you need to know. Think about it. This area borders both Afghanistan and Iran. It was just way too big and way too volatile for a single command structure to handle effectively. And the scale we're talking about here is just staggering. Get this. The Northern Command in Balochistan alone has about 37,000 troops. To put that into perspective for you, that one single command is bigger than the entire national army of a lot of countries. It's huge.
And a force that big needs equipment, right? Well, it got a ton of international backing. Just between 2002 and 2007, the U.S. poured over $7 billion in military aid into Pakistan. A huge chunk of that cash went directly to equipping the FC. That really shows you just how critical the U.S. and its allies thought the FC was in the fight against terrorism.
So how does a paramilitary force like this stay so closely tied to the official military? Well, it's all in a leadership. See, all the top officers are seconded from the regular Pakistan army. That's just a fancy way of saying they're temporarily loaned out, usually for 2 or 3 years, to command FC units. This system creates this totally seamless operational link between the two.
Okay, so when you put all of this together, the colonial history, the immense power, this huge mission, what you get is a really, really complicated legacy. On the ground, you'll find that the FRC is seen in two completely different ways. For some people, they're protectors. For others, they're oppressors. There's not a lot of middle ground.
And this negative perception, it's nothing new. The source material is pretty blunt about it. Especially in places like Balochistan, a lot of locals associate the FC with some pretty heavy-handed tactics and, yeah, human rights violations. And that reputation, it really goes all the way back to those counterinsurgency operations in the 1970s. But here's the twist. At the exact same time, you have U.S. intelligence experts looking at the FDC and saying they are the best possible force for fighting militants in that region. And why is that? It's actually pretty simple, because they recruit their soldiers locally.
Unlike a big, conventional army moving in, these guys already know the language, they get the culture, and they have a chance to build a kind of trust that an outsider just never could.
And all of this brings us right back to the central question, the big puzzle. Is the Frontier Corps just a relic of the colonial era, something that can't ever really shake its oppressive past? Or is it a modern necessity? Is it the only force that can actually bring some kind of stability to one of the most volatile regions on the planet? The answer, just like the force itself, is incredibly complex.